Welcome to the Backyard Bounty Podcast from HeritageAcresMarket.com, where we talk about all things backyard poultry, beekeeping, gardening, sustainable living, and more. And now, here's your host, Nicole.
Hello and welcome to Backyard Bounty. I'm your host, Nicole, and today we're joined by Jessie, who raises some unique chickens for dry fly hackles. And welcome to the show, Jessie. I appreciate you taking the time to join us.
Hey, thanks for having me here.
Of course. So let's just kind of dive right in. Dry fly genetic hackle chickens. Can you help me understand more of what that is?
Yeah, so it's actually not a breed of chicken. They're basically a big group of mutts that are held in a feather stasis that would not naturally happen in the wild. We breed for longer and more uniform feathers, so there's a few parts of the feather that we focus on. The quill of the feather is made as thin as possible. The little barbs that come off that make what we call a feather, actually a feather, are kind of bred to be parallel and uniform with as many of them as possible. And then at a microscopic level, there's little barbules that if you've ever picked up a feather and split it apart and then kind of pieced it back together with your fingers to kind of make it a feather again, those are actually bred out so that these feathers don't suck up water. Making that kind of a goal of the overall bird is one of the main parts of these. There are things that are just as important, such as we breed longer leg lengths and longer necks, so that we can also grow out long saddles and keep the birds actually as fertile as possible. Long straight legs are a great sign of positive fertility.
So that kind of just blew my mind a little bit. What's the correlation between leg length and fertility?
So having straight legs for us, meaning that the knees don't come together, feet aren't turned in. These birds are heavily bred towards high testosterone, and having good straight legs means that their the upper sides of their body, such as their testicles, are in the correct area. Especially, like I mentioned, with the high testosterone, where your typical rooster is going to have a testicle the size of a lima bean, ours actually grow out to about the size of a ping pong ball.
Oh my goodness. And
yeah.
I assume you need more testosterone to grow the feathers. Is that kind of the correlation there?
Yes. We breed specifically to get so breeding on a rooster. The testosterone is boosted to promote feather growth because they feel they need to be beautiful to attract a mate, and so we kind of force that into the breedings, so their combs get enormous. And that is actually also a secondary sexual organ for them. But that is very important for them to want to, on a genetic level, grow out these feathers as fast as possible.
How interesting. I think what you do, of course, is total opposite of everybody else, which is why I think it's so interesting because, of course, 99% of everybody else wants to have a flock full of hens, whereas you predominantly want the roosters. That's what's valuable to you.
Yes.
So when you, we kind of talked a little bit earlier and about some selective breeding traits. Are you able to do any like special breeding to get more roosters out of your flock?
No, we do. We basically get a straight run. Right now we're kicking out right around 240 eggs every about 10 to 12 days. We put those in a incubator. Um, it's not like we just, oh no, it's a hen, let's get rid of it. We actually do breed out hens as well. They're used in a slightly different type of fly tying. They have softer hackles. They're usually aimed towards more wet flies. They are usable, but we just don't get the amount of money that you'd get out of a rooster. So we pick the ones that we aren't going to breed, and then we range them to keep our food costs down. Because if we were to feed them, we just absolutely lose money.
Sure. So you said that your birds are a mutt. I know I was looking at some of the pictures on your Facebook. Is there like any dominant breeds that are used to create these mutts? Like the one looked, and I'm just guessing here, but the one looked like maybe it had some of a Dominique lines in it or anything, or are they just purely kind of just random mutts?
Oh, that's actually a fantastic question. It's going to be easier to explain through a little bit of the history. Our birds go all the way back to the very, very first guy who attempted to make these into a genetic hackle. His name was Harry Darby back in the 30s. And he started, his roosters were Thompson Barred Rocks. And then he got hens like Blue Andalusians and, let's see here, black-breasted reds. Let's see here. There's a few others. And we do get colors out of those. Harry Darby was more interested in, let's make a pretty bird, and didn't quite understand how to breed for the characteristics of the birds. And so mostly he made blues and kind of chocolate browns and barred animals kind of in those variants. Another guy came along in the 50s and he used, my understanding, and I might be wrong on this, but he used something that would be much closer to a heritage barred rock, and that guy's last name was Hoffman. And our grizzly line, which is chicken genetics and hackle genetics, generally do not have the same names for colors. Where you have your barred rock, we'd call that grizzly. Mr. Hoffman really started going for genetic traits in the feathers more than colors. In fact, he only really had black, grizzly, and kind of a white, although I use that term loosely because dominant white, where someone thinks of a white chicken, is completely useless to us because on a genetic level, that says my feather is not important. That's why meat birds will be generally white and things like that, because the energy for the animal's growth is going elsewhere. And one of the things that we really run into in that is to make a real white, which is a fantastic color for like dyeing and getting it out there, is keeping that white, because it'll want to go yellow. It'll want to, the feather is being tricked into being white is basically the short answer there. As time went on, we had a few colors between Harry Darby and Mr. Hoffman. And then in about 1971, a guy named Andy Miner, who got a hold of some of Harry Darby's birds, he probably put the most realistic work into improving the breed. And he really started focusing on how to make a uniform feather, getting the barbules bred out of the bird, starting the process of breeding in long legs, which is incredibly difficult. And from there, several large groups, basically any successful hackle company at this point has birds that have been influenced by Andy Minor. And you can really tell the difference between somebody who doesn't have minor birds and somebody who does. But quality, every generation has to be focused, even after an influential guy gets their hands on them. These birds can really lose their viability, their quality, their usability very, very quickly in just a matter of a generation or two if you're really not paying attention.
So other than kind of the stuff that we already talked about the feathers and the leg length and the comb and stuff, is there any other differences between these chickens and, the common chicken that people have for egg production or whatever?
Well, once you have yes. There is enough of a difference that if you put the two birds together, you'd start to see that it's clearly a goal in mind for these birds versus, say, for instance, a partridge rock or something like that, Rhode Island Reds. The colors are there, the genetics are there to make those colors, but the way that these birds hold their bodies and the way that their feathers grow, they stand out. I mean, the really good birds that make quality high-end saddles likely have origins to like Onagadori, which is a very difficult type of chicken that grows long 12, 14 foot long tails. And they're not actually an Onagadori until they're 3 years old, but one of their characteristics is the ability to grow their saddles and not molt them. Where your typical roosters and your typical even hens, they're going to molt fairly regularly. We are actually breeding in the ability for them not to molt as often. Ideally, never, but usually we can get 3+ years out of an animal not molting.
Oh, wow. So are they usually 3 years old when you harvest the capes and saddles, or I just assumed, I guess, that once they were 6, 8, 10 months old, that's when you would use the bird?
So it's right around 10.5 to 11.5 months is the average. If a bird is really showing something outside of that realm where it's like, oh wow, this might be worth keeping to the end of when they might molt or being used as a breeder, they're held back. And it's kind of a numbers game. You hatch as many as you can, and you take your top 3-5% and breed them so that you keep your lines going. You have backups of colors, because it would be very easy if a rooster keeled over, you could lose what that rooster is holding, such as like a black deluder, like a blue or a dun deluder, or some other thing that was desirable. The idea is to get another one.
I know that looking at these pictures on your Facebook page, there's a picture of you holding one of these birds that I would assume then would be a grizzly, and I can't really tell. I believe it's his saddle feathers. They're probably, oh my gosh, 12 to 16 inches long, which and they're beautiful. The colors on it are gorgeous.
So he'd actually be called a grizzly variant. I know which white guy you're talking about. He is one of our little rock stars here. He is a very grumpy bird, too.
Oh.
But he knows he's wonderful.
Oh, of course.
He is a full expression of an anti-molt gene. And he's actually, even in that picture there, he had to get a haircut so that he can go visit the ladies. He can actually throw a 2-foot plus saddle, no problem.
So these birds, like, how why did you decide to get into breeding them? They're so unique and they're such a niche. What drove you to go down this avenue with birds?
That's a pretty good question. So when I was a young boy, I was immersed in Colorado Trout Unlimited, and I met a lot of people along the way. I helped out at the Trout Unlimited auctions, holding up items, and being a cute young boy, I was really good at selling raffle tickets to people who I later found out were some of the premier fly tyers in not just Colorado, but the world. And it's kind of fun that when you run into somebody who kind of likes to drop names, it's like, yep, I've known them since I was 6. And so that didn't quite poke the hole in, I want to do genetic hackle. I got into fish for a long time, like aquarium fish. I liked working with extinct in the wild species such as pupfish and tequila split fins and things like that. And I really have always liked something that stood out, that was just different. And I got into healthcare for a little bit, and I promise I'm staying on subject here.
No, you're fine.
And for quite a few years, I worked in healthcare, and I developed an innate ability of solving other people's problems while I wasn't focusing on my own. And about 9 years ago, I finally started to realize that, hey, I think I'm in the middle of a drug and alcohol problem that is killing me. And it took me a while to get completely clean and sober. And I actually have been sober since April 12th, 2012.
Congratulations.
And thank you. I've been working the path of a sobriety program, and on my 5th anniversary, I married a girl and moved away from Denver out to a little town called Julesburg, Colorado, in the northeast corner of Colorado. And along with my lovely wife came 2 fabulous in-laws that are expecting us to take over the family farm. In the process of that, I started to realize, wow, it's really difficult to do anything successful in farming, such as cows, goats, regular chickens, things like that, planting corn. And so I got to thinking, hey, maybe we can do something about that. And then I got to thinking, is like, we have the land to maybe do some chickens out here, or some other kind of birds. I originally thought peacocks or something like that. And then I got to thinking, isn't there like a bird that does the hackle stuff? And so I started looking that up. And in the process of that, I kind of got swindled on 2 flocks of birds twice. And so ending up with, I bought one flock of birds, I was told, this is genetic hackle, and I was like, okay, sure, kind of looks like in the pictures. I get it there, not really knowing what I'm thinking of or talking about, and I get these birds, and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to become a millionaire with this. And then I ran across somebody who actually knew what genetic hackle was, and they were like, no, that's not even close. And so I was like, oh, maybe these are the genetic hackle. So I found who they bought their stock from, and I went and bought those breeders because I was like, maybe these are closer. Maybe he knows what he's doing. And I got those birds, and they came in the U.S. mail, and I opened those boxes, and I just about broke down and cried because they weren't right. Then I have a fabulous mentor. He it was kind of telling me, it's like, these just aren't the right thing. You don't have the right animal. And he sent me 3 of the right animal. I had sent him some money for them. And 3 true genetic hackle birds, 2 roosters and a hen, came to our farm. And I compared them to the birds that I had. And I mean, you could just see the difference. I mean, they're so different in the way that they feel, where lots of chickens are kind of soft and these ones feel like you're running your hands through straw. And he then told me about the guy he had gotten his birds from and how he was actually looking to focus on his family and get out of the genetic hackle business. And so I called this man named Joel Alsdorf out of Pennsylvania, and we discussed a price to purchase his breeders from him. And we went to Pennsylvania. My wife and I tag team drove to Pennsylvania and showed up as tired as we could possibly be, and then had to learn a lot of stuff. And we came home with 19 roosters and 31 hens to start our hackle business. And Mr. Alsdorf has been a mentor to us as well as my other guy, Ben Ross. He's been just stellar in teaching me how to watch for genetics, what I'm going to get out of them. And he's like an encyclopedia on what comes out of a chicken egg.
Wow, I'm sorry to hear that you had some challenges getting there, but it seems like it's always funny to me how life sort of plays out, and sometimes you go through some challenges, but that puts you in a position to come out better in the long run. And it sounds like that kind of is how it worked out for you, and you kind of jumped into that hackle business with both feet.
Yes, absolutely. And the entire family is in on this too. My wife, my mother-in-law, and my father-in-law are all just absolute pillars of the foundation of what I feel is going to make this work, especially being such a difficult market to break into.
Yeah, it's certainly, I don't know that you necessarily went the easy route, but the best things come for the most work.
Yes.
These birds, once you raise them to where they're ready to be used, do you sell the capes and saddles to anybody, or do you only sell them to specific fly tyers, or are they available to everybody?
Oh, they're absolutely available to anybody who would love to use them. And we are trying to be competitively priced. We kind of say some of the other guys that are doing this are selling at very Cadillac prices. We want to be in the more blue collar price bracket, so that first of all you feel that you're getting a good deal, and perhaps you can get more bang for your buck on top of having a good quality product that you'll come back to us time and again for more. And yes, I will be selling them to fly tires, fly shops. We're working at making a little online store, but for the time being, it's probably going to be more of a Facebook marketing flash sale sort of deal.
Sure. So forgive me, I don't know much about Hackle chickens. When you breed them, do you, because they are mutts, or as you put it, do you always get like from this group, you always get the grizzly ones, which is what I'm just going to keep going with because that's what I remember you saying. Or do you kind of get a variation from your breeding projects?
Okay, so yes, we do get variations. Out of a grizzly, I can make grizzly dun. I can make grizzly blue dun, grizzly, and so grizzly has a nice, beautiful V in its barring. There's little V's that go down in coloring. That's a sign of double barring, and I can also make it single barred, which is a much more messy, buggy color. You can easily get 9 to 12 colors out of a rooster over 3 hens, no problem. And then there are colors that are much more fragile, like I mentioned, the cream or white. They kind of that's pretty much what you get out of them. And then there are some pairings that we do to roll for what are much rarer colors, such as Cree is what we call it, CREE. And that is a pairing of, it doesn't happen very often, and it's not sexually transferable, but it's a white to a ginger to a black 3-striped color on a feather. And we do breed for that. We breed for colors like, in chicken language it'd be called Creole. We call it ginger barred. Birchen, we call badger in the Hackle world. We make badger, honey badger, furnace, which is red badger basically. And then we also try to kind of messy those up with speckling, where somebody that would be going for a standard of perfection on a bird would say, no, that's terrible. Well, we love it because it's different. And just to kind of get those colors together, yes, there are groups that we can move birds around in to get the desired effects that we want. But in theory, I could give any bird, any boy to any girl on the farm, and we could get something potentially usable out of a pairing like that. Yes and no. There is, so we have, like I said, our creams are whites. Grizzly would be dyed as well, but some companies really do even dye their blue duns and things like that. I want to bring actual buggy colors. When you're making a fly, you really want to imitate nature, and a lot of the colors that you're going to go out and find, you're going to go find mayflies and bugs, they're going to be brown and gray mostly, and I think I can capture most of those with just a couple of colors. I am working on making more buggy looking colors just to bring an eye of beauty to the table for fly tyers. Fly tying is kind of a hobby of passion. And some people, I'd go so far as to say they might take it overboard. They're looking for that perfect color. They're looking for that perfect match. And so giving them a variety is definitely a goal we aim to be able to fill. But in the future, I am looking at dyeing some colors. I am avoiding it at this point because I genuinely feel that if I raise something up and its goal is to be beautiful, the work that I put into it, I see that beauty in the animal itself. And if somebody wants to change that color, they're more than welcome to do it themselves at this point. But for right now, I just want to show that we make really good stuff, and the beauty is in itself that is coming out already.
Yeah, and you can see it in like you said, the birds that you have online, they really are just stunning.
Thank you.
Yeah. So do you have any other, future business goals or, birds that you're wanting or colors that you're wanting to pursue?
Yeah, we are actually in the process of adding a color to genetic Hackle. For right now, I'm going to kind of keep that a little bit of trade secret, but in the future, we do hope to have something that stands out and is completely different and is hopefully successful in sales. We are working at breeding also towards a wet fly line, meaning all those barbules that we bred out, we're going to breed them back in and make a nice, beautiful, soft feather that comes out of the same kind of lines as the dry fly groups do. That will basically diversify our products so that we can go above water and below it. And then we've also been looking into the possibility of ornamental pheasant and hybrids thereof. But I'd go so far as to say that's probably a ways out. I want to be I want to be more than good at one thing before I start adding stuff. And I can definitely say yes to a million projects, but I'd rather not be a master of none of them.
Right. I think it's definitely makes sense to find the one thing that you're good at and run with that instead of trying to have your hand in a bunch of different pots there.
Yes.
So with the barbs and the wet versus dry, is it something like the barbs, and I'm just guessing, making this up. I'm not sure if you would know, but do the barbs have something to do with like surface tension of the water, or why is it that the barb versus barbless determines how the feather can be wet or dry?
Oh yeah, no, that's a great question. So So what happens to these feathers is one would be pulled off and wrapped around a hook so that it splays out, and that so not having those little barbules on the barbs means that it won't suck up water. If you have a sponge versus if you have a piece of paper, the sponge is going to suck up more water, and having more barbs on the feather so to spread around is similar to either trying to step on a nail or stepping on a bed of nails. And so the hook is then held on top of the water because it makes that little bed of nails that doesn't break the meniscus of the water as it flows down a river or sits on a lake, and that's what makes dry fly genetic hackle its definition.
And I guess I do, now that you explain that again, I remember you mentioning that in the introduction. I guess I just kind of got lost in all the other interesting information and forgot that you had mentioned that. So in a normal chicken, obviously those feather barbs would be there. So breeding them out is, I don't want to use the term unnatural, but I don't suppose there's any types of birds that would normally just in nature have feathers without those barbs, right? Like that's kind of a fundamental function of the feather themselves. So basically it's challenging to breed out those barbs is, I guess, what I'm trying to say.
Yes. I am unaware of any type of poultry or feathered critter that has no barbules naturally. I'd go so far as to say these are, like I said, they're kind of held in a stasis outside of what would happen naturally, especially for a chicken. And it doesn't hurt them, but yes, it won't occur in nature. There's no real loss of benefit. These birds can still fly just like their other chickeny friends, and they can hop around. They can find food, just all the same. But yes, it is something that was selectively bred for, and it is one of the main points of it, main points of several in making a quality dry fly feather.
I'd like that you mentioned that they could fly, because I would have assumed that without the feather's ability to interlock itself, I guess I assumed that they would kind of be flightless, because I figured they would try to flap and the air would just rush through their feathers, since they don't stick to each other.
We do have several every day that decide that they want to go visit everybody else and flap their way, and we haven't worked in the jukebox with the Benny Hill theme song yet, but that's a pretty good explanation of what it's like when they're wandering around, and they are more than capable of doing all the same things their other birds can do.
I have a slight background in falconry and raptors, and I know that a big thing with a bird that you're flying is if they have like a feather break or somewhere where those feathers separate, then they need to replace them so that they can be in peak flying capacity. So I guess my brain just assumed that because with falconry, it's important to make sure their feathers are all, I don't remember the technical term, but I like stitched together. That makes sense in my head. The little barbs are all stitched together. That, that's interesting to me. I assumed that they would be flightless.
Well, and your birds of prey are much more gliding based. Chickens are while they can fly, that's still somewhat of a loose term. No chicken can fly very long, where a falcon would, their mainstay is staying in the air for long periods of time often. And so that is a different shape to the wing, and yes, absolutely, having a damaged feather would severely impact the amount of energy that it would take for them to stay in the air. Where as a chicken, they're going to flap their wings and get a little ways away, and then they're honestly going to completely forget that they were running away.
Yeah, that's. I guess I didn't really put much thought when I asked that about the actual difference in the flying of the birds, but no, that's absolutely makes sense. So for those that would like to find out more about your operation and those that might be interested in buying some of the capes and saddles from you, how can people find you online?
The easiest way is to find me on Facebook. You can either search out Jesse Lerud, JESSELERUD, or you can find me at facebook.com/slimplatty, SLIMPLATY. And you'll know you found the right place when you see my little cartoon platypus and grumpy platypus Hackle.
All right, great. And then your website, you said that's coming soon as well?
That is coming soon as well, probably closer to the end of the year. I spend much more time building things for these little birds than I do messing with my computer lately.
I totally understand. Well, we'll put links to all your social media, and then once you have your website up, we'll put a link to that as well, so that people can find you and learn more about your birds.
Thanks.
Of course. Well, Jesse, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us and tell us about your chickens, and I appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us.
This has been a lot of fun, Nicole.
I enjoyed it. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
And thank you for listening to Backyard Bounty, and we'll see you again next week.
Thank you for listening to Backyard Bounty. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast and please leave us a review. Backyard Bounty is available on iTunes and Stitcher, or watch us on YouTube.